Judd Wilhite is the senior pastor of Central Christian Church in Las Vegas. I've had a chance to visit Judd's church. When you're in our business, you spend a lot of time in Las Vegas, trade shows and the like, and we know Las Vegas is a strange and wonderful place. So Judd's going to be speaking to us this morning on how the church is a fellowship of broken people helping others to experience a spiritual life in Jesus Christ. So without further delay, will you please welcome Judd Wilhite.
Here's a funny thing about people. We all like to look good, to make a good impression, to show everyone else we have it all together. Even though none of us do, the only way to pull this off is to put something else on. And that something is called a mask. A mask can help you get a job.
I have over 12 years of consumer electronics experience, playing video games in my parents' basement.
It can make you look smarter.
Organizational energies to maximize corporation synergy. I have no idea what I'm saying.
And more dateable.
I can't believe you're single.
And I can't believe you're 25. I'm not single.
I'm not 25.
We use our masks to impress people.
65-inch LED TV. Oh, it was gorgeous. It was like only this thick. I mean, it's expensive and all, but it is the best. So much debt.
We use them to fool people.
I thought I was going the speed limit, officer.
We even use them to protect the feelings of the people we love.
That was a beautiful song, sweetie. I'm pretty sure you're tone deaf.
I think I'm just gonna walk to school today, because I'm kind of embarrassed to be seen with you.
He sounds like a great guy. What are you thinking?
You do not look fat in those jeans. So that's why they call it a muffin top.
We all wear masks from time to time, but the craziest place we put them on is in church.
Hello, brother.
Amen.
Greetings to you on this day that the Lord has made.
Something about it makes us want to look our best.
I'm fine.
Sound our best.
He hath blessedeth me so verily.
And make like everything is perfect.
Things are great.
But behind every perfect mask is a perfectly messed up life. People with hearts that are empty, confused, addicted, hopeless, helpless, and hurting. People who think but here's the thing. This is exactly the kind of life where God shows up. Messes are his specialty. The one thing God can't work with is a mask. So around here, we have a saying. It's okay
To not be okay.
Nobody's perfect.
But grace is available.
We believe God doesn't love us if or because.
He loves us anyway.
We all like to look good to others. We like to make a good impression. But when it comes to God, the best impression you could make is to just be you.
Well, hey everybody, it's great to be here and great to be with you. That was just a video, we did this past Easter to try and just connect with people in the place where they are in their life. And I know that's what you guys are trying to do in so many ways with your gifts, whether it's in the arts or in technology or however God has wired you up. In my own life, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was raised in Amarillo, Texas, and not about 6 hours from here. My parents went to church, and what I remember is as a kid, I would go to church. They would walk into church. They would say they were going to go to the worship service, and I would tell them I was going to go to the kids area, and I would walk through the church, walk out the back door, walk out into the alleys around the church, smoke cigarettes, and wait for church to be over. And I would watch these people walk into church week in and week out. And I never really got it. I never understood it. I didn't know why they went. I didn't know what the point was. I didn't understand kind of the meaning behind any of it. And then when it was all over, I would meet my parents back up at the car. Some of you remember this experience growing up as a person, we'd meet up at the car. My mom would say, "How was church?" I would say, "It was great." She'd say, "What'd you learn about?" I said, "We learned about Jesus." And that always seemed to be enough for her. Of course, I've got a little boy now, and I can remember remember recently he came home from church. I said, Ethan, how you doing? He said, I'm great. I said, how was church? He says, it's great. I said, what'd you learn about? He said, I learned about Jesus. I'm like, get over here and sit down. That is not going to work in this house, right? Because I did that growing up, and you cannot get away with that in this particular home. So I skipped church for a long time. I didn't really get the point or the meaning of church. And I started running around in high school with a bunch of kids that were older than me and got into all kinds of stuff. And by the time I was around 13 years old, I got involved in a drug addiction that I carried in my life for 4 years till I was 17 years old, and started with pot and alcohol and just progressed to meth and speed and everything you can imagine. And what I remember is standing in that church parking lot one particular day and being in a situation in my life where I was at the end of myself. I had recently overdosed. I had been unconscious for a while, and when I finally came to and sort of came to my senses, there were no medical people involved, but I knew then this was scary, and I didn't know where it was going. And if I kept going down that road, man, I was going to be at a place where I was either going to die or I was going to go to jail. Something bad was going to happen. And so I'm standing in that church parking lot, and I'm smoking a cigarette, watching people walk in. And I just realized, I don't know if I believe in the God thing. I don't know if I buy this whole Christian story, but here's what I know. I can't get out of this situation on my own. I can't deal with this in my own power and in my own strength. I need help. And so I walked into the doors of that church for the first time on my own terms and began to ask my own questions. And I found my way to a little group of people that were in a small Bible study, and they gathered up on a weekly basis. These weren't like the cool people, the cool kids in the church. We were sort of the oddballs and the riffraff and the leftovers. And we gathered, and that group of people, they answered my questions. They talked me through the challenges that I was facing. They coached me off the edge when I wanted to go and use again. And because of that group of people, literally, God saved my life. And he did it through the church. I'm celebrating 23 years now of sobriety in my life. And I go back to that little group of people. God used them as a life-saving community in my life. Every time I'm back in Texas, I just remember where I came from. I remember my roots. I remember what it was to feel hopeless, to feel like I would never be free from this addiction, to feel like my life would never be different. Remember what it was to feel completely powerless and desperate. And in that moment, to have a group of people come around me and walk with me and encourage me. A couple things happened in my life out of that experience. One is I committed my life to helping other people who are hurting and who are broken find the grace and the love and the acceptance of Jesus Christ. And the second is I committed to doing it through the local church community. And so have you. That's why you're here. That's why you're learning and you're growing and you're expanding your knowledge in your heart so that you can help other people experience the grace and the love of Jesus, so that you can do it through the church community. You're using your unique gifts and your unique abilities. And friends, let's never lose sight of that fact. We are in the life-saving business. The stuff that you do on a regular basis is some of the most important stuff going on in the world right now. The work that you're doing through the local church is absolutely critical. And you and I both know it isn't about the architecture of the space, even though that's important. It isn't about having great sound, even though it's very, very important. It isn't about having awesome video equipment and great cameras and talented operators, even though it's very important. At the end of the day, it's about the life-changing power of Jesus Christ for hurting and broken people. And all we're trying to do is get out of the way, use technology and our gifts and our abilities so that that message can get clearly and powerfully into the hearts and minds of people, because that's the message. That's what it's about. That's what's going to change their lives and set them on a whole new trajectory for years and years and years to come. And friends, sometimes it's hard, isn't it? Sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes you look around, some of you are in church environments and work environments, some of you are volunteering and serving, and you've got time pressures, you've got demands going on in your own family, you've got a lot of things pulling you away from this, and we just got to remember that the work we're doing is critical. In fact, I went through a season a few years ago in Las Vegas where I was just ready to tap out. I mean, I was about ready to just throw in the towel, and I was thinking about it more and more and more. I couldn't get it off my mind. And it wasn't because I didn't love Jesus and feel called 100%. It's because I was so tired. I feel like many times in Las Vegas, we're like this light in the darkness, and the darkness sometimes is suffocating, and it's all around you. And you look around, and the culture doesn't really get what you're trying to do, and other churches outside of Las Vegas sometimes love to criticize us because we're in Las Vegas. So I feel like even my brothers and sisters in the church community sometimes don't get what we're trying to do, and you just start to feel really alone. And we'd gone through this recession in Las Vegas over the last few years that have been absolutely brutal. 1 in 5 people in our church is partially or completely unemployed. 70% of homeowners in Las Vegas, their homes they're underwater on their homes. And man, when I say underwater, I'm not talking about $10,000 or $20,000. I'm talking about like $200,000 underwater on their home. And so their whole retirement looks different. Their future looks different. Their whole life looks different in light of all this. And so we're seeing suicides in our community at record levels. We're seeing suicides in our church. We're seeing people just cash in and give up and walk away. And so as we're walking through all of that, I'm counseling all these people going through stuff. We're trying to navigate it in our own power. We've been through 2 rounds of layoffs in our church, and we just came to a place where I was really getting worn out. And I remember we'd had this group come in and do this study. And they went around and they talked to people in our church, and what they came back, it was kind of a personality profile, a brand personality profile. They came back after interviewing 600 people, and they said that 98% of the people that they interviewed used this language in our church, that God had saved their life through the church community. And when I heard that study, I want you to know, I got on my knees and I wept. And I asked God for forgiveness, and I recommitted myself again to the ministry of helping save the lives of people. That's what we're called to. Wherever we're at, whatever context we're at, whether you're running a camera, whether you're at a soundboard, whether you're clipping a mic on somebody, whether you're setting up and tearing down, whether you're making sure facilities is clean and operates with excellence, all we're trying to do with all of those things is remove the barriers so people can experience the life-changing love and message of Jesus Christ. And one of the things we've learned in Las Vegas is simply this: if you're willing to reach out to the broken, you will always have an audience. You'll always have an audience. Now, the broken could be down and out. The broken could be up and in. It's not about economics. It's about meeting people in the pain and the brokenness of their life. And I want to talk to you today about how you can leverage technology to reach out to the broken in your communities. So if you have your Bibles, if you want to follow along, I'm going to teach from one of my favorite stories, which is in the New Testament of the Bible in John chapter 4. And we're going to pick it up in verse 7. John chapter 4. Now, John 4 is Jesus interacting with the Samaritan woman. And he meets her at this particular well around noon. His disciples are hungry, and they go off to get food. And so here's Jesus. He's in this situation with this woman. And, I think he's there very strategically, very specifically. And here's what the Bible says. John chapter 4, verse 7. It says, "Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water. And Jesus said to her, 'Please give me a drink.'" Now, what's fascinating to me is when you begin to research this, to offer a drink to somebody in the ancient world almost served like a contract. It was almost an extension of community and friendship. And in essence, when Jesus asked for a drink, what he's really asking this woman is this: will you be my friend? Will you be my companion? Which was a radical thing to do in this context. First of all, it's a guy, it's a girl, then it's a Jew and it's a Samaritan, and the Samaritans were seen as sort of ethnic half-breeds. They weren't full-blooded Jews, and so they're in the midst of this conversation, and she's shocked by it. It says he was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food, and the woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. And that, in the original language, the idea is Jews don't drink after Samaritans. So she said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink? Why do you want to be my friend? Why are you offering this moment of companionship at this well?" Here's what I love about this story. Jesus could have met with anybody, right? If he's God incarnate, he could have met with heads of state. He could have met with political leaders. He could have met with people in great power and authority. He could have met with anybody that particular day, but he set an appointment. He set a divine meeting with a lonely 5-time divorced woman at a well in this region, a Samaritan in this region. That's remarkable. Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he meet with a head of state? Why wouldn't he meet with a celebrity? Why wouldn't he meet with a political leader? Because God loves hurting, broken people. And here at this well, Jesus made an appointment and said, I want to interact with you, and I want to do it right in the midst of your pain. I want to encourage you, reach out to the broken with technology, with everything that you have at your disposal. Reach out to people in their brokenness. You know, I was walking in Caesar's Palace a while back with a friend of mine, and he did something I've never seen anybody do in my entire life. We're walking along, and he's mid-sentence talking to me, and all of a sudden he's like, well, you know, Judd, and then he just throws up. I mean, mid-sentence, like it gargled a word, if you know what I'm saying. I've never seen anybody do this. Usually when you get sick and you're going to throw up, like you get a little warning, right? You know, I think I might be sick. I'm not feeling so great. I might throw up in just a moment. Could you please excuse me? Or at least you bend down. Come on. I'm talking projectile, straight up, like no warning, out of nowhere. Now, I'm a sympathetic vomiter. Any of you are any sympathetic vomiters? You know, when you see it and when you're around it, it's just like, wow, you know? And so he's talking along mid-sentence, boom, here he goes, you know? And then he just sort of looks at me and I'm like, are you okay? Immediately I'm thinking, I'm going to throw up because here it comes. And so I start getting queasy, and we just keep walking because I don't really know what else you do when you just throw up mid-sentence. And we take about 15, 20 more steps, and he's sort of processing. He's like, wow, I threw up. I'm like, yeah. Yes, you did. There's sort of people all going this way, and we're walking this way. And he goes, I think I'm going to throw up again. I said, okay, well, there's some restrooms back over here. And so we turn around and we kind of get in the flow of the other people going the other direction. Now, nobody really knows this happened because it was sort of, it was just sort of happened, and we just kept walking. And so we didn't make a big deal about it. And there's kind of people all around. And so now we're in the flow of people going the other way. And I'm trying to get him back to the bathroom, because I got a ticking time bomb here. I mean, I don't know when he's going to go off again. And we're walking along, and I look up, and it's like in slow motion. Here comes this poor woman walking the other way. She walks right into the middle of that mess, and before I can do anything or say anything, both feet up, right down on her backside. Yeah, it was nasty. And I see this happen, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. And we walk up to her, and she's sitting in it, and she looks up and she goes, what's this? God is my witness. I'm thinking that's Mexican, but you don't really want to know what that is. She says, what's this? And her friends come over and grab each of her arms, and they help her get up to her feet. And I'm thinking we should say something. I'm thinking we should stop and try to help. And then I look over at my friend who's about to go again. And he's like, So I grab him and I just act like I don't know what's going on. And we just walk right past the mess, get right around the corner, and he throws up again, and then again, and then again. It was ugly till I finally got him home, and we got him sort of cleaned up and taken care of. But in the midst of that, it made me think that's a lot like life, right? People are walking along, they're navigating their own business, they're taking care of their own stuff. And all of a sudden they walk into a mess. Maybe they created it, maybe somebody else created it. Maybe it's their mess, maybe it's just a mess that was there. And before you know it, both feet are up and they're right down in the middle of that mess. And when you're in a mess, you really don't need somebody walking by and going, hey, you're in a mess. You don't need somebody coming by and going, how dare you get in that mess? What is wrong with you that you are in that mess? Because it would be easy to do in that situation if you didn't know the whole story, which was she had no idea there was a mess there. It was a friend of mine who put the mess there, and she walked right into the middle of it. You know what you need in that moment is what she had, which is two people to come alongside you and help you in the middle of the mess, right? Help you get up, help you get on your feet, help you move forward. And when we begin to look to the Bible, we see that that is our call, to meet people in their mess. Listen, ministry is messy. Ministry is messy because sin is messy. Get over it, get a mop, and start helping people clean up. It's going to be messy. It's going to be a challenge, but start helping people clean up and helping them get up. Jesus meets this woman at the well in the middle of her mess. Check this out. John chapter 4, beginning in verse 16. Jesus says, go and get your husband. And he's kind of setting her up. She says, I don't have a husband. The woman replied, Jesus says, you're right. You don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You clearly spoke the truth. This is like a bomb going off. Here she's talking to him. She's like, oh, I don't know. I don't have a husband. He's like, yeah, you've had 5. And the guy you're living with now, not your husband. I imagine this woman standing there in this moment and she's looking at Jesus and all of a sudden everything just gets exaggerated. Time slows down. You hear the birds of the air chirping, you feel the rocks intensely under your feet. And, later she'll sort of progress in her view of Jesus from you're a Jew to, I can see that you're a prophet. And all of this is sort of moving forward. She'll go back to her town later on and she'll say, come meet the man who told me everything I ever did, which is a little overstated, but you get the moment here where she's just sort of exposed in her brokenness and her sin. And Jesus knew that long before he got there. And you know what? He knew about your sin. He knew about my sin long before he extended grace. He knew about our brokenness and our past and our pain. He knew about your weaknesses long before he called you into this role of leadership. He knew about your failures long before he entrusted this role of leadership to you. He knew about not only the failures you did make, but the failures you will make. And he still entrusted you with this leadership and this role and this unique set of gifts and this skill set to make a difference in the lives of people. And listen, who are you and who am I to say to Jesus he made a mistake? He knew exactly what he was doing when he called you into ministry. He knew exactly what he was doing when he called you onto the team. He knew exactly what he was doing when he called you and deployed you and empowered you and said, now you go and make a difference in the lives of others. And he knew exactly what he was doing when he meets with this woman at this well 2,000 years ago. And he meets her right in the middle of his brokenness. At Central, we started to ask 2 different questions years ago. We put them up on a whiteboard. And these questions really formed how we tried to leverage not only technology, but really our whole ministry to helping hurting people in our community. We just began to ask this: who's hurting that we can help? And who isn't being reached that we can reach? Who's hurting that we can help, and who isn't being reached that we can reach? Now, that's not very heavy stuff, is it? That's kind of like the most basic questions in the world. But I want you to know, we put those on a whiteboard, and that started to reframe our whole ministry paradigm, framework, because we began to look then at everything through those lenses. For instance, we started to look around and we realized, I'm in Las Vegas. I'm in the addiction capital of the nation. I'm in the pleasure mecca. And we did not have any kind of drug and alcohol recovery program going on. Now that's a little stupid, isn't it? How stupid do you have to be in Las Vegas and have nothing going on for addicts? But it wasn't until we started putting those questions on the board and thinking about them that we kind of realized, man, there's a lot of hurting people everywhere. And we're doing nothing to really help them deal with the addictive issues in their life. So we launched years ago a recovery ministry that's just grown and expanded and is really doing a fantastic job helping people at all kinds of layers of addiction find hope and find healing. We began to reach out to our local prison system because we discovered that while in some states the prison systems have tremendous spiritual organization and leadership, in Nevada, and particularly in some of the prisons around our church, there was really no spiritual emphasis. We found that in a women's penitentiary near our church that the most they had ever had, at a religious event, was under 12, ever. So there was zero spiritual influence. And so we began to leverage technology, video technology, and they allowed us, because we came in and did small groups around that were recovery oriented, they opened the door and allowed us to come in and do a church service inside the prison. And so we leveraged video technology. We have great audio, and man, it is so loud. It's louder than anything you could ever pull off in church. It was so loud when I went out to the women's prison the last time, and they had the band on video across the screen, and they have the great audio going. It's so loud that all I heard was ringing for 3 days in my ears because it's cinder block walls all around. But what increases the volume even more are these ladies. screaming and yelling and worshiping with all of their hearts, so loud as they acknowledge God. And I want you to know, we went into this prison area and began to set up shop and begin to have worship services. And they'll only let us set up seats for half the prison because they don't want more than half the prison anywhere at one time, and they won't let us do more than one service. But it's standing room only. Half of that prison now attends services every week. And what we found is inside the prison system, it's not like they're sitting back saying that they want prison services. They want worship services that help them normalize their life. They want to think about going to Walmart and going shopping and being connected to a larger church community. So we launched in one. Then we began to think, how can we use technology to continue to reach other hurting people who are connected to these people that are in prisons? And we launched a thing called Church with Inmates. And Church with Inmates is a way that you can go to church online, on the web, and see the same exact experience at the same time as your family member is attending services behind bars. And so now what's happening is, because of technology, you're going to church together. You see that? You're able to go with your husband or go with your wife or your kids are able to go with you. And then at the prisons where we've done this, what we've seen is this huge line at the phones after church. Because the people are lining up and they're waiting to call their spouses and their kids and to talk to them about going to church together. Now, come on, man. You got to be heartless to look at something like that and not get excited. That is an awesome thing. We are in the life-saving business. None of that's possible without the amazing benefits that technology brings to us. And yet, somebody had to sit back and say, man, ask those questions. Who's hurting that we can help? Who isn't being reached that we can reach? And then reach out and do it. There are other things that we started to do as well because of those simple questions, reaching out and helping people. But here's what we found. When you start helping broken people, it's going to get messy. Now, I know in my context in Las Vegas, messy might mean something different than in your context, but it's going to get messy no matter what. I mean, I can remember the day an elder who was on our board who hired me was standing beside me, and he said, you know what, Judd? We used to reach lost people, but now we're reaching really lost people. I mean, I didn't know there was like a sliding scale, right? I didn't know that there was kind of a 1 to 10 on the lost scale, and I'm like, wow, okay. And then he said to me this, I'm no longer comfortable with my kids being with their kids in the children's ministry. He left the church. I got to tell you, that hurt. That hurt. I remember the lady who was leaving church one day and she said, you know what, I'm leaving this church. I said, why are you leaving? She said, well, I'm no longer sure what I might catch from the person who sat in the seat before I sit in it. I said, wow, I think Jesus is more offended with what you just said than with what that person may be doing. I mean, it's all great to talk about no dress code, right? We do that in our church. Hey, a lot of you do it. Come as you are. There's no dress code. Everybody's welcome. Until, people start showing up literally in their Hooters outfit after work or before work. Or people start showing up dressed somewhat, not completely, not illegally, but somewhat inappropriately and really pushing the boundaries. It gets messy. It's going to get messy. It's like the guy recently, he was coming down, guy was leaving our services, and on his way out, he grabs one of our volunteers and he goes, hey man, I think you got a dead guy up in the bleachers. And then he just walked out. He's like, yeah, you might want to check on that. Which, I mean, come on. First of all, in a normal scenario, wouldn't somebody check on the guy? It's like, wow, I mean, I think that guy died, and then he just sort of heads out like it's, and so our volunteers go over and sure enough, up in our bleacher area, here's a guy, he's fallen over the seats in front of him and, he's just laying there. He's not moving. They think, oh my gosh, this guy might be dead, right? So they get around him and they help the guy up, they pull him up, and as soon as they pull him up, he burps and they realize, oh no, he's just smashed drunk. Which I think is interesting. He comes and sits in our service for an hour, okay, drunk, but he doesn't pass out until after the message. And then he stands up at the very end and falls over. I'm like, how does that happen? Don't you have to be drinking through the message to pass out at the end of the hour and not before? I mean, how much do you have to drink before you leave home to completely pass out? But it gets messy. Because you start working with broken people, it's going to get messy. I remember Lori and I, we pulled up to pulled up to a billboard, and on this billboard were the backsides of several different women, and they're wearing thongs, and they were topless, and it was just their backs. And we pulled up to the stop sign. I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my 8-year-old, who was 7 at the time, he says to his sister, he goes, Emma, he goes, which naked girl is your favorite? He says, I like the one with brown hair. I mean, that was a moment for us. And then my wife, in a moment of sort of parenting brilliance, turns around and says, Ethan, we do not have favorite naked girls. I'm like, okay, Mom, just naked girls, not favorites, just naked. It gets messy. A while back, I got somebody followed me on Twitter. A few different girls followed me on Twitter, and my wife came in and she goes, hey, I think that I think that these girls that are following you on Twitter, I think this is porn spam. Let's look at it. And so we started looking at it, very sexually explicit photos and bios and all of that. And as we looked at it, what we realized is, no, it's not porn spam. It's legitimate. Like, these people are going to our church. Great. And so we're talking about this, and so I'm like, so should I follow them back, right? You think about technology and social media, right? Should I follow them back? Do you follow back people that are very sexually explicit who begin to follow you? And she says, well, she asked me, I thought this was brilliant. She says, what would Jesus do? And immediately we both knew, well, Jesus would follow them back. Jesus hung out with prostitutes to the point that was his reputation, a friend of prostitutes and sinners. And I said, all right, I'm going to follow them back. So started following them back. Well, this kind of went on for several months, and I sort of forgot about it. And then a couple weeks ago, I had an appointment after one of our weekend services, and I walked out and I met with this family whose mother had just committed suicide. And these were all like kids, 18 to 20 years old. It's about 10 or 15 girls and a younger brother who's 18. And we prayed together and we talked together, and they had tears, and they were talking about how they never knew their father. They grew up in a tough home. They've been trying to get their mom to come to church. It's been an uphill battle. Nobody in their family goes to church. And they had come to Central on their own initiative, and had started bringing all of their friends. And they're like, we didn't know anything about this God thing, but we're growing to a place where we believe in our lives. And they were so thankful for what Jesus is doing. I walked out of that conversation so energized, because, you have conversations with somebody and sometimes and you just think they're not getting it. They're not dialing in. I walked out of that conversation and I thought, wow, they get it. God is becoming a reality for them in their life. And then what was amazing to me is when I went and I was looking on Twitter later that afternoon, I realized it was those girls that we thought was the porn spam. Those were the girls that I just met with after service that particular day. And they're all tatted head to toe, and they're like 18 years old. But God was transforming their life. And that's why I follow everybody on Twitter. In fact, a friend of mine emailed me recently from Nashville. She goes, hey, Jed, I just want to know. She goes, I follow you on Twitter, and then after I followed you, Sapphire Strip Club in Vegas started following me. She goes, I think they're following me because I'm now connected with you. And I said, well, there's a story behind that. I follow everybody. I wouldn't suggest you should follow Sapphire Strip Club, but I follow everybody, particularly everybody in Vegas, because again, when you start using technology and social media and other things to reach out to hurting, broken people, it's going to get messy. Be ready for it. But God will honor it as you continue to meet them in their point of need. Another thing we see in John chapter 4 is simply this: to see restriction as an opportunity. See restriction as an opportunity. Look at this, John chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. It says, Jesus replied, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Now I want you to think about this. Jesus is talking to this woman in an area where drought was a reality. They knew about the need for water, and he uses the need for water as they're standing at this well to point this woman to the spiritual aspects that he can provide for us in our lives, that he is the living water. He takes restriction and he shows how God can use it as an opportunity. Friends, in our lives, that is absolutely key if you're going to reach out to broken people. See every restriction as an opportunity. Because it's really easy to come to a conference like this, listen to great teaching, get inspired by great people, and walk out, and all you see are your restrictions. You're not seeing your opportunities. You're seeing like, man, we don't have money for those lights. Those are some cool lights. If we had those lights, then we could do ministry. You know, our audio gear stinks. You know, it sounds like a crappy jam box that's been dropped on the ground. If we just had those speakers, man, if we had that audio system, then even our pastor would sound good. Wow. You know, if we just had those cameras, heck, we could make our pastor look good. We could just reframe him right there, you know, in the screen. We could get it done. And it's easy to look around and think, man, if we just had this gear, if we just had this thing, and what are you seeing if that's what you're doing? You're seeing all the restrictions. You're not seeing the opportunities. And my challenge to you is the rest of your time here with your team and with your people that you came with or on your own, circle up and think and meditate on the opportunities that you have, not the restrictions. Think about how you can leverage what God has given you. Think about how you can take the gear that you do have. Think about how you can take the skills that you do have and leverage them to help hurting and broken people. Stop focusing on what you don't have. Focus on what you do have. And you do have a lot. As my friend Peter McGowan, who's here and was speaking just a little while ago with Plain Joe Studios out in California, he always says, you know, it's not about having the best gear in the world. It's about what you can do with the gear that you have. Not about having the best. I mean, having the best gear is great, right? We all agree on that, right? Having the best gear be awesome. But you can have the best gear and be lame if you don't know what you're doing. And you can have pretty sorry gear and be pretty amazing if you know what you're doing. So maybe you don't have good gear, and maybe you don't have a budget, and maybe as much as you wish as your senior pastor or your leadership person over your team, maybe as much as you wish as they would see the need for this and give you the budget for whatever it is. Here's what you can do. Even if you can't afford this particular thing or that particular thing, you can hone your skills in this season to take what you are working with and get absolutely great at it. You can hone your gifts and your talents and your abilities. See restriction as an opportunity. And the way we've done that at Central, we've faced a lot of financial restriction the last few years. In fact, I would tell you, we grew by about 35% as a church. Listen, we grew by about 35% as far as adding people that we're responsible for. And in that 35% over a few years period, our budget declined $1.8 million. So we grew 35%, and now we're $1.8 million behind what we started with even before we grew 35%. You see what I'm saying? That's extreme restriction. And we had to do a couple things to learn how to handle it. One is we had to fight the martyr mentality. You got to fight the martyr. What's the martyr mentality? Some of you are doing this already. You're walking around, oh man, woe is me. If we just had this, if we just didn't have Baptist in our name. Yeah, I said it. If we just didn't have orange carpet in our church. If our church just didn't smell the way it smells. If some of you know there's a church smell sometimes, like I pastored a little church in Texas years ago, and here's what I remember is no matter how many candles I lit or how much Glade I sprayed, when you opened the front door, it still smelled like the church. I don't know, it just smelled like it. Just, yeah. And it's easy to walk around and feel like, man, if we just had this and if we just had, you got to fight the martyr mentality. And when I talk at our team about, man, we think we don't have this and we don't have that, which is ridiculous because I can take you to Chile where 100,000 people gather in a park outside with nothing and they worship Jesus and they call it church. And they're not walking around going, man, look at what we don't have. Their hearts are focused on what they do have. So fight the martyr mentality. Here's another thing. Find the yes. Find the yes. Get with your teams. Talk about not what you don't have, but what you do and how you can find the yes. What do I mean by that? Listen, around Central, we started to say no to everything because the economy kind of does that to you. And many of you are feeling that pinch in your own churches and in your own ministries. So, will you have a new idea? No, we can't afford that. You want to try this thing? No, I'm sorry, we can't do that. You need this camera? No, I'm sorry, we can't get that camera. You want to do this? And here's what happens is if you're not careful, first you start saying no to a lot of opportunities. Then your team members and others, they start thinking no when they have new ideas. They're like, man, that'd be a great idea. But no, we're not going to do it. They don't even ask anymore. They just think it and it ends. And so pretty soon you start, you stop even thinking of new ideas because as soon as they start to happen, you go, it's never going to happen. Some of you are there right now, and you know what that means? That means you're in autopilot mode. You're completely checked out. You're just doing your job, showing up, do what you gotta do. It's gonna be lame, so be it. It's gonna stink, so be it. It's never gonna move forward. It's never gonna change. And you've brought into this idea that the answer is no. We had to get our whole staff together because we were all doing this to the point that we were in autopilot. We had to pull everybody together, and I just said, look, the answer is yes. They all looked at me like, answering yes, man, we're broke. There's one friend of mine says, you guys in Vegas are college broke. She said, answering yes, dude, what are you smoking? I said, look, the answer is yes. And here's what I mean by that. Bring your ideas, we're gonna put them down on paper, we're gonna put them up on whiteboards, and we're gonna look for wins. We're gonna refuse to start with no, we're gonna find the yes. We wanted to launch an online campus. We just laid off, our second round of layoffs or our first round of layoffs. We didn't have any money, zero money. But we're like, we wanna launch an online campus and really expand that. We felt called to do it. So I remember, we all got together and the answer had been no for a while, and I'm like, no, the answer is gonna be yes, we're gonna figure it out. And so one person on our team got on the phone and started cold calling people and got to know an elder of a church in California who had built some web software for, a secular organization who basically for a couple $1,000s sold us the whole platform for an online campus. We got it for less than pennies on the dollar. Now, I'm not suggesting that's sustainable. I'm not even I wish I could give you that guy's number, but I can't. What I am suggesting is this. That doesn't happen if you just see no and restriction and you never move past it. That only happens when you say, we're gonna find a way to do this together with or without the resources we think we need, with or without the situation that we think would be ideal. We're gonna find the yes. And so find the yes in your ministry area and let God use that as you open your heart to Him. And then thirdly, I wanna encourage you, tell the truth in love. If you're gonna reach out to the broken, if you're gonna impact people who are hurting in your community, tell the truth in love. Sometimes there's a temptation, I think, to take technology, to take great lighting, to take great video and all of that, and to be cool. And we face this. I'm in Las Vegas, right? Our competition, if you want to talk about being cool, is the Las Vegas Boulevard. Our competition are some of the biggest shows that tour the world. Our competition is, the multi-billion-dollar Las Vegas Strip. There's no way you compete with that. There's no way you can compete with that. But one of the things that we've discovered is that we don't need to compete with that. We don't need to try to be cool. We don't need to try to be original. We don't need to try to be creative. All we need to focus on is taking technology and telling the truth. The truth about God, the truth about our life, the truth about His Word. I love what C.S. Lewis says, and this is worth coming today, right here. C.S. Lewis says this. I'm paraphrasing him. But he says, whether it's in literature or in art, he says, everybody who tries to be original fails. He says, if you're trying to be original, you're gonna fail. If you're trying to be creative, you're gonna fail. He says, but if you forget trying to be original and you focus on telling the truth through your experience, Lewis says, 9 times out of 10, you will be original because you focused on telling the truth. Does that make sense? You focus on telling, and we had to shift our ministries and our philosophies around this idea, but we got to tell the truth of the Bible, the truth of God's Word. We got to communicate it in a way to people, and we got to do it through the stories God's writing in our own lives. And when we began to focus on that, when we moved the focus from trying to be cool or trying to be creative or trying to be this, and we said, you know what, we just want to be faithful before God, and we want to tell the story of the Bible in a way that's powerful for people. I believe our ministry just began to take off and blossom and grow out of that experience. John chapter 4, verse 25, as Jesus is talking to this woman at the well, the woman finally says this. She says, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. And when He comes, He will explain everything to us. And then Jesus told her, I am the Messiah. That's the truth. Christ has come to set us free and to deliver us and to work in our lives. That's what all of our technology is leveraged for. That's what all of our gifts are leveraged for. It's what all of our skills are leveraged for, to tell the world and to show them the truth that Jesus is the Messiah. We had a reporter come to our church a while back, and he came in, and Vegas is not necessarily the most pro-church environment, and so he's listening to me talk, and he initially thought it was pretty cool. He thought, man, maybe this is a different version of Christianity. And he goes, the music's really loud and rocking. And then the pastor walks out and he said, I look like a roadie for Nickelback. I'm not sure how to take that roadie from Nickelback, but he says, and so he's like, man, this is going to be a new version of Christianity. But he said, but the longer he talked, the more frustrated I became. And then he kept talking about the Bible and opening up the Bible and going back to the Bible. And he says, and this is how he ended his article, and he meant it as a slam. He says, if you want to know Judd Wilhite's perspective, see the Bible. Now, I got to tell you, I wanted to frame it. I mean, I've been slayed by some journalists, and I've had people take shots at me, but that right there was the best backhanded compliment I've ever received in my ministry. Listen, if they want to know our perspective, see the Bible. We're not trying to be creative. We're not trying to be cool. We're trying to tell the truth of God's word in a compelling way so that people can grasp it and be impacted by it. We're in the life-saving business. Think of my friend Cody. Cody was a guy that was sleeping in a field next to our church, and he had been a Bass Pro fisherman in another life. He had been in a situation where literally he'd made hundreds of thousands of dollars fishing. He'd been featured on ESPN. He had eaten at fine restaurants with well-to-do celebrities who were in the fishing world, but he got caught up in a crack addiction. And because of that crack addiction, he burned through his life savings, over $600,000 that he had saved up. He smoked it all away in crack. He took all of his possessions, he put them out in his front yard and had a huge yard sale, took the money from the yard sale, put it in his backpack and walked away, began to sleep on the streets. And he'd been sleeping in a field next to our church for about 8 months. He hadn't had a shower in multiple months. In fact, he said he stank so bad that the homeless were walking around him and avoiding him. He goes, man, Judd, you stink when the homeless are avoiding you. So he heard he could get a shower if he came into our church. And so he came over to our church on a Sunday morning. He said he walked in, he didn't want anything to do with God, didn't have any patience for the God thing. But he said he walked through the door and there was a volunteer. And she walked up to him, just a lady in our church, and she said, you look like you need a hug. He said, Judd, all I wanted to do in that moment was put a gun in my mouth. And if I'd had the money to get one, he says, I would have done it. She said, this lady walked up to me. I hadn't had a shower in months. She put her arms around me and she hugged me. Her name's Michelle, volunteer. And he said, it cracked a door in my heart that maybe there was something to this God thing. So he came in and he ate with our team and he got a shower and he got cleaned up and he started lurking around our church on the weekends. He'd come and he'd sit in the far back rows of the bleachers and he would just sort of listen in back there and take it in. And eventually he came by our church. We have this little church library and he slipped by there and he got a Bible out of the church library, which later he told me, he goes, Judd, I stole a Bible and I never returned it. He goes, man, I'm sorry. He goes, I'm willing to pay you back for whatever that Bible cost. I'm like, dude, it's a Bible. It's for stealing. Go ahead, take as many as you want, right? Come on. But he got on his knees one day out in that field next to our church and he asked Jesus for the first time in his life to really move and to forgive him and to help him and to walk with him. And he said he became the happiest homeless guy in all of Las Vegas. Literally, in that field, he was having Bible studies within a month with homeless dudes. He was gathering them around and opening up his old Bible that he'd borrowed from us. And he's still on the street, because it's hard to get off the street. But he's having these Bible studies with people. And eventually, we were able to get him a car and get him a place to live and help him get situated. And he's a very talented guy. He started his own business, did really well. He remarried. And so, this after about 5 years, he's just doing you would look at him and you would think, man, this guy's got it together. He's fantastic. And you would never know that the first time I met this dude, he's 6 feet and 130 pounds, this close to death, right off the street. Christ put him back together. One day there was a little an edict that went out from our mayor. And the mayor was trying to put a law out that said you couldn't feed the homeless on the streets of Las Vegas. And so Cody was sitting at home and he sees this law and man, he's blown away by it and he thinks, I got to do something about it. So here's this guy, he came off the street, but he gets this little rinky-dink attorney and he challenges the mayor and the ruling of the mayor and those in our city leadership that were trying to stop the ability to feed the homeless on the street. And so it eventually goes before a judge. Here's Cody, just standing there with his rinky-dink attorney. Here's the mayor's people in all of their suits. And the judge looks out, looks at my friend Cody, looks at the mayor's people, and basically rules for Cody. He says to the mayor's people, you cannot differentiate and you cannot basically punish one group of people and kind of focus in on them only without dealing with anybody else. And so he threw the whole thing out of court. And truly today, the reason you can feed a homeless person on the streets of Las Vegas goes back to a guy named Cody who came into our church, about 7 or 8 years ago, right off the street, who Christ grabbed a hold of. But here's what's even cooler. I wrote about his story in a book that I wrote several years ago, called Uncensored Grace. The hardback was called Stripped. And it's just about God's grace working in our lives. And we got a call at our church a few years ago from a woman in Northern California. She said, I was reading this chapter in your book, and I think Cody may be my dad. She's an attorney in the San Francisco area. She's a follower of Jesus, and she says, for 10 years I've been looking for my father. I've spent well over $50,000 on different private investigators and others trying to find him. And I read this chapter, and everything fits because he had come from San Francisco in another life and all of this. And so we took her number. I gave it to my friend Cody. He called her. He went up. They began to talk. Sure enough, he didn't even know that he had a daughter. He ended up taking the tests and the whole deal, and this was his daughter that interacted with him. Now here's what's cool. He didn't even know she existed. He not only has a daughter, he has grandkids and an extended family who are followers of Jesus. And this is what blew me away. I'm talking to Cody, and he says, Judd, when you come to follow Christ, God just blesses you with more and more and more. He goes, I was sleeping in a field next to this church with nothing to my name. And now I've got a wife, I've got an extended family, I've got grandkids that I love. He goes, Jesus has restored all of it to me because of who he is. He's a wonderful, wonderful God. And I looked at Cody and I said, all right, it's stories like that keep me in the game. It's God moving in people's lives that keep me saying, all right, I'll keep getting up. I'll keep doing this. It keeps us honing our craft, whatever your craft is, whatever your gifts are, to say, I'll be better. I'll bring better audio than I've ever brought before. I'm going to bring a better mix than I've ever brought before. I'm going to bring more effort and energy to coaching our volunteers than I've ever brought before. I'm going to do my absolute best because the stakes are so high, because we're talking about changing people's lives and their eternities. We're talking about the most important thing happening in the world today, the work of the church. This isn't politics. This is real life change. This isn't just education. This is real transformation. This is God moving and working, and you're part of it, and I'm part of it. Reach out to the broken. Leverage technology to reach out to the broken, and you will always have an audience. Let's bow and pray together. God, we're grateful for your love. We're just thankful for your mercy and the way you work in our lives every single day. And I pray for each individual here, God, that you'll just inspire them, that you'll walk with them, that you'll remind them that you have a plan and a purpose, and you're working it in their church and in their ministry, that in their own lives, God, I pray you'll give them clarity and direction over the rest of this conference, that they'll be inspired and they'll be empowered really to go out and to make a difference in the culture and in this world. We thank you so much for Jesus. We thank you for what he means to all of us. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you, guys.
Judd, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Powerful message. If you've got questions for Judd, we have people in the aisles ready to take your questions. Judd would be happy to answer questions about Central Christian Church, doing ministry in Las Vegas, Sapphire Strip Club, prison ministry. Here we have Christine in the back, and over here we have, I think we also have Christine. Oh, there she is. Okay. So come on, don't be shy. Anybody? Bueller. There we go.
Hey, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your testimony of just being faithful to Jesus is amazing and completely blessed. I don't run any kind of technical thing. I'm a designer, and I'm working for a church that actually reaches out to women's ministry in prison. And you mentioned something about how you can go ahead and do some sort of video to be able to have all the family go to church together. Can you explain how that worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So we record our services. We're on 4 locations physically, and outside of our original or broadcast campus, all of those different campuses, the teaching is by video. So we already sort of do this in our church culture, and then we're currently in 4 prisons as well. And so in the prison environment, it's just a simple screen, and I don't know all the tech specs on it. I'm in the wrong place to not know all the tech specs on it, right? It's just a simple screen and audio setup, and it's our full band. They record all of our worship. We don't try to recreate that in the prisons. We actually just bring it in from our weekend experience. So they record it across the platform, and then it's just a speaker shot of me teaching. And so it's just kind of our weekend experience on video. And since that's happening in the prison already and at our multiple campuses, we have an online campus where that whole weekend experience goes out online, but we created a separate website and specific times synced up with our prisons, and that's churchwithinmates.com, where you can go to church at the same time as these services are happening. And so it's basically like an online church campus synced up with a prison campus, both of which are the same video, and you're able to go on the inside at the same time as you watch it on your computer on the outside. Does that make sense?
Is that live, or is that
It's
delayed?
simulated. So it's kind of simulated live. Actually, in our prison environment, it's a 1-week delay. For our local campuses, it's we record on Saturday night and broadcast to those campuses on Sunday morning. So it's kind of more, simulated may not be the true technical term, but it feels a little more live because it's that weekend, but we don't actually stream it live. And so with the prisons, it's actually a week delayed. It's both on their website and in the services.
Right. Anybody else? Here we go.
I really appreciate your message. And this past week, we had our first guy come into our church that said, I'm first time here this morning, and I started attending a Bible study from someone from your church that's in prison. And we have 2 guys from our church that are in a local jail. That's the first time that's ever happened to us, but so that was a new experience for this week. And obviously, there's a whole part of wanting to make sure we continue to protect our church and protect our people and all that. And I know we'll continue to wrestle with that, like what you said. But how do you, in your environment where you're in Las Vegas, obviously, we're all looking at you like many of the things that you said, but how do you put boundaries around yourself to protect yourself spiritually, protect yourself in areas of integrity and all that? I'd love to hear just how
I'm sure security,
you walk that life.
security is an element of that too.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, it's, I probably, the honest truth to that is it's probably real similar to what people do everywhere. And so while I think Las Vegas has some extremes, and there is a sense in which, there's some definite extremity there, it's still the same temptations. You've got it right here in the Dallas area. You've got it in any small town in America. You've got meth labs in your town. I got them in my town, So there's all kinds of temptations that come in our lives from a different perspective. But I do a few things that I would encourage anybody to put into practice in ministry. One, I never meet with a woman alone. And just because of my role in our church and because of kind of where things are at with us, that applies to me universally in every situation. In fact, I can tell you it's been years since I've been alone with a woman who isn't my wife. And so in counseling and in other things, I have my assistant or someone else in the room with me. I almost always travel with someone else so that I'm never in a travel situation where I'm alone. I try to have good accountability with an accountability partner in my life who will kind of dig beneath the standard questions and the standard fare and really try to do some hard analysis on what's going on there, try to limit my travel. I think one of the biggest challenges for people is getting too tired. When you get too tired and you get too run down, you get vulnerable. And if you're not careful, you'll compromise the very things that you hold most dear in your life. And so really simple things that I neglected for a long time, like sleep and exercise, are things that have become higher priorities for me, along with the spiritual disciplines that we often sort of take for granted, that I'm going to read my Bible, I'm going to stay active in prayer. I think knowing your own sort of spiritual language with God, your own gift mix. For me, I have kind of an intellectual bent, and so reading is a huge thing for me. And so I try to put specific times on my calendar where I'm spending an hour just reading a particular author, and I book it with them as if I've got an appointment with them, kind of an immovable appointment, because that's another way that I manage that spiritual growth side of things in my life, and it's not connected to a message or to any teaching that I'm doing necessarily. So some of those things have been really helpful for me. I try to be home more nights than I'm gone. I try to be home, it doesn't always work, but I actually try to be home 5 nights a week. Sometimes it's 4, but I always do my best to try and be home more nights a week than I'm out.
We've had several classes here the last couple of days dealing with emergency planning, security elements. It's part of running a worship facility. Is there anything that's different about doing ministry in Las Vegas, or any input that you'd have on that front for your personal security or the security of those who attend? Yeah, it's important, and I believe it's very important. I don't know what your pastors are like. I know we've got a lot of senior pastors here too. I know that for me, I don't buck against it, but I'm hard to nail down because I like to be out in the lobby. I like to roam around. I don't like to be confined. So I pretty much drive our team absolutely crazy, when it comes to all of that stuff. But that's the pastor side of me that wants to be out, and it's such a tension sometimes. You're trying to manage your love for people and want to be accessible to people with the fact that, we've had some situations. We'll have more situations. And, in a city like Las Vegas, we're pretty much the #1 religious target. So that's a scary place to be in a place like Las Vegas. Yeah. Anybody else? Come on, people. Chris, over here.
These guys are thinking lunch.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you also. I was so touched by your story. I'm over way on your right side. I see you trying to see in the audience.
Thank you.
But one of the things that really touched me was when you were saying that ministry is messy. And I recognize it's messy whether you're dealing with homeless or prostitute or just regular, quote unquote, people.
That's right.
But my question for you is, what did you do to help your people who were there before your ministry opened up to folks from the street to kind of help them prepare to deal with the messiness of ministry so that they weren't all leaving like those couple of examples that you cited when you spoke?
Well, I think first I just would clarify that, in our situation, I would never suggest that you guys do prison ministries or that, you're called to necessarily the same kind of people that Las Vegas has, that we have in such abundance, in our area. I think you got to go to your area, right? So there could be a place in your ministry where you're doing more ministry to the least of these, but for many of your churches, you have a different calling, and that is great. And I would never want somebody to walk out and think, wow, they do prison ministry, we should do prison ministry. They work with prostitutes and all of this, we should. And I know you're not asking that, but we should work with that. Not necessarily. The broken people are everywhere. Some of them are the most wealthy, put together people you'll ever meet in your life, and they're sitting in your churches now. Some of them have been in churches for years, but if you meet them in that moment of brokenness and that place of hurt in their life, they'll be very touched and very, I think, moved by that experience. For us, we just had to keep casting vision to create a culture of grace. And Central for years has had a culture of grace for people. And that goes with, I think, being in the Las Vegas area. And so some of that we were already down the road on that culture. But I think continuing to cast vision for it, continuing to be open about it, and to talk about it honestly, continuing to tell stories of people. And for us, that's not like an outreach ministry. I mean, that is Las Vegas. Las Vegas does not have an urban core. Suburbia in Las Vegas is urban. Does that make sense? Like, it's more like an urban core spilled out all over the suburban area. We're just reaching the people that live in the homes all around our churches. I would say we're actually reaching the normal Las Vegas person, and they got so much stuff going on in their life that it's pretty extreme, the level of brokenness. So that culture of grace is important. Walking with people is important. And I think helping them get buy-in along the way. So for us, we had to continually show, first we need to make some changes. You have to show people why. Why do you need to make some changes? Well, we're not reaching enough people. We're not impacting our city like we ultimately could. This is serious. We lead the nation in everything bad. We should be changing the moral framework of our communities, but we're not. And when you sort of frame up the why, as we frame that up, people then they're going, oh wow, we really do we got to step it up. We got to get involved. And once we created that need, then we were able to cast some clear vision and say, here's how we're going to do it. But we still lost, a lot of people over the years just because, and we're always, any organization, any church that's doing, I think what it's called to do is going to change and continue to reinvent itself. So, some people will leave in this cycle of reinvention as you're reaching out to these people, and as God morphs that vision, you're going to have others who leave, in this cycle of reinvention. And so for us, like when the elder left that had been there with me for several years, that was a good thing. We're still friends. It's cordial. He loves the church. He didn't leave mad. He didn't try to burn it down. He knows I love him. He loves me. God was calling their family to something else. And that's okay too. I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your multi-sites. Are they permanent locations? Are you doing portable church? Is it a mixture? Do they have their own live bands, or is everything piped in from video from the central campus?
That's good. Well, we're on 4 locations in the Las Vegas area. We have 2 properties that we actually own, and then 2 properties that we do set up and tear down in. One of them is a public high school, and one of them we relocated a while back to a really amazing Christian, it's called Faith Lutheran School. So it's a Christian liberal arts school that had built a $10 million auditorium. And they let us use that auditorium on Sunday. So that's an amazing space. So we're in 2 set-up tear-down spaces and 2 actual spaces. It's everything's live except for the teaching moment, and that moment is it's different at different campuses. At some of our campuses, it's a large center, mounted center HD shot along with 2 side screens and a standard
definition. So they have their own worship bands, worship leaders, somebody greeting them live, and then the message comes in.
Own campus pastors, their own youth ministry teams, staff teams,
Right. Okay. Christine.
Hi, thanks so much for your very inspiring message. My name is Joe Seashon. I'm from Connecticut. If I or anybody was here were motivated to help send you a contribution and support, where would we get that information? How would we do that?
Well, thank you. A couple ways. centralchristian.com is our church website, and you could just go there, and there's automated way you could do that on the church website. If you're interested in the prison side of it, we created a nonprofit organization called GodBehindBars.com that's actually partnering with some other churches. And it's not just me necessarily in video. We're actually partnering with a few churches now where there'll be other pastors that God Behind Bars is leading out. And they're kind of branching out in their own way, which helps with the prison system. You don't want to, it's a lot harder to work with the prison system as a church. It's a lot easier for a nonprofit to interface there. And so GodBehindBars.com. You can give and contribute online as well if you'd like to support them. I know they would desperately need it too. And feel free to reach out to me in any way. So, yeah.
Okay. Judd, thank you again
thank you.
so much. Powerful stuff.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you
so much.
All right.